The Crypto Markets Update is brought to you by KuCoin, the best place to find the next crypto gem. Joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Marcus Sotiriou, market analyst at UK-based crypto broker GlobalBlock. Hi there, Marcus. Thanks for joining us. So we're seeing a surge in the crypto markets overall. What do you believe is underlying these tailwinds?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I think one key catalyst is, the tax day in the US was yesterday, and people would have had to potentially liquidate some of their equity holdings or crypto holdings, for instance, to help pay off their tax bill. But I think also we're seeing consumer strength actually quite high at the moment, and that decreases the risk of a recession later on down the year. In January, the data that we were seeing suggested that, if consumers were fearful in Q1, then we'd have a potential recession in Q4, and that would be awful for the markets. But data that's been coming in, I think it's actually pretty positive. So, for instance, last week we saw JP Morgan's report that showed how they were guiding higher for inflows into the stock market, and they actually had a greater income into their inflows than expected for Q1, which I think is very telling. And also Bank of America had their delinquencies were below the level of 2019 levels. So that delinquencies obviously shows us people that are past due on their debts, and seeing this sort of data shows the consumer strength at the moment. And I think that's very telling. So that's things that make me optimistic, even if we do end up getting a 50 basis point rate hike in May.
So do you think it is stock driven? Because I'm just taking a look at the US stocks right now. We see the S&P Dow and NASDAQ futures are up. Is it just following the markets, general traditional equities, or is it guided by its own?
So at the moment, I think it's very tied to stocks, and as a risk asset, it's correlated to risk assets when there's significant macro headwinds like we have at the moment. We've obviously got the war going on in Ukraine, the disaster in the Donbass, which is a headwind at the moment. We've got a tightening going on. So when we've got these macro headwinds, I think that the effect on stocks is something that we definitely have to look at. Crypto has become such a big asset class. Well, it's small relative to where it can get to, but it's become more institutionalized now, so that it actually is correlated with these other risk assets.
So, Marcus, we're still kind of in a tight range, though, since at least the beginning of the year, if not earlier. And it's happening with low volume. And this is despite all these economic headwinds and concerns, and despite a war that popped up at the end of February. So what's going on really with the demand and the supply of Bitcoin stepping back a little bit here? I mean, it's nowhere near 68 where we were before. It's nowhere near 15 where we were years ago. It feels like decades ago, but not so long ago. But so what's going on?
Well, I think what we're seeing is retail interest at the market at the moment is really, really low. And that's partly because we've just been, as you say, in this tight range for a while. Bitcoin's acting, it's being very boring. And we're not seeing that extreme volatility that has in the past attracted participants. I think at the moment, what we're seeing is large whales and long-term holders accumulate, whilst, retail aren't really interested at the moment. I think this is a great time to be accumulating for the long term, because we've got these macro headwinds in play, and which is causing a lot of fear. But the data that we're seeing suggests that we won't see, a recession later on this year, which would obviously be what we're afraid of.
Anything interesting happening on the altcoin front, or are we just basically seeing most of the altcoin market follow Bitcoin's lead?
So for now, obviously, while Bitcoin is being very boring, it hasn't really made a decisive move. Altcoins, as you say, they're not really doing much. And the attention isn't really on altcoin prices for the most part, anyway. But I think when altcoins are being, not very volatile, I think that's the time to really pay attention, because that's the time when they're not really moving much and they're not really outperforming the market. So that's when you want to pay attention. And I think there's particular altcoins that I'm focusing on at the moment. One of them being Cosmos, as they launched a $150 million fund last week. Well, announced the launch last week, and I think that's a great milestone for them, because all of their competitors are have been launching funds for quite a while now. So it's about time that Cosmos announce a fund of this magnitude. And I'm very bullish on the potential for Cosmos in the sense of providing a multi-chain future, because their fund will actually allow them to fund multi-chain projects. And like we saw with Axie Infinity, with Axie Infinity's bridge, that was a cross-chain bridge which became hacked. So that's why a multi-chain future like what Cosmos is providing, I think we'll see a bright future.